Hey everybody, and welcome to Wizard and the Bruiser. I'm the Filthy Wizard, and I'm casting a horny spell on...
Me, the Bruiser. My tiny loincloth is struggling against the strain of this horny spell. I'm Jake Young, and guess what? We already talked about disruptive robot-based anime before in our legendary Gundam episode.
Oh my god. A homeless man stopped me on the street and was like, Gundam? Gundam? And I think he was talking about the episode. Not completely sure.
But get that out of the way. We have another subversive giant robot show that made even more money.
The giant robot show that flipped the script on anime itself, arguably. Jake Young, we are talking today about Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Fly me to the moon, let me stand among the stars. It's nice that they ended always on like a very calming song.
And I love how they started the show with a very upbeat song. Bum, 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 bum. And the name of that song was A Cruel Angel's Thesis. It always made me laugh. And I think that that's actually a really good sort of overall, like almost a metaphor for the whole show. This sort of like shiny, happy rapper, and the inside is just a pool of psychological trauma and religious symbolism and just craziness, just dark craziness.
I think it's almost key that like we went over it in the Gundam episode, but it bears repeating that when you think of Japan and giant robots, there's two separate genres. There's real robot, which is kind of Gundam, and it's based on like military tech and like kind of all the technicalities. If you see a lot of like pistons and levers, that's probably a real robot show. But there was also the super robot genre, which is dumb. Like, think Power Rangers, think Mazinger. It's always just like space aliens getting rocket punched. And it's, always like a bright-eyed young kid. These were toy commercials. I'm trying to think of like, if Gundam was like Batman the Animated Series, all these super robot shows were like Street Sharks. Just forgettable, disposable, and the average Japanese kid watched hours of this stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And one of those kids went by the name of Hideaki Anno. And I think in order to understand Neon Genesis, you really have to understand the man behind Neon Genesis, and that would be Hideaki Anno, who was quite the otaku. Do you want to describe otaku, Jake?
Well, traditionally, the word otaku, it meant one's home, and it's based on the idea that people have a singular obsession. There were train otaku, there were model building otaku, there were anime otaku, and the emergent kind of otaku culture was based around these fan conventions where people could celebrate all of their favorite influences, from robots to toys to Western movies to fantasy novels, and it was kind of the precursor to what we understand as the whole Comic-Con culture, especially like the large like events that we know it as.
And actually that one of those large events would come into play for a big part of Anno's development in his career in the early stages. He was born in May of 1960 in Ube, Yamaguchi, Japan. He was a very shy...
Ube Yamaguchi.
Oh, Ube Yamaguchi. I've met many a shoe salesman from Ube Yamaguchi.
5 sandals for a yen. At Ube Yamaguchi.
And you better take a bite out of that yen to make sure it's real. Yen are cookies. Anyways, he was a shy kid. He hated lunchtime, which was a weird situation. He dealt with a very bad clinical depression, and he was also, again, an otaku, especially for sort of, big giant mech cartoons and stuff like that. There's a really fun, like, home movie that he did for, like, a school project where he plays Ultraman, and you can watch some really great footage of that on YouTube.
Wait, a shy kid who watched a lot of cartoons and was worried that no one would sit next to him during lunch? I have no idea what this man's life was like. What an unrelatable turd.
He hated lunch, actually, because he's a vegetarian, but he loved milk. and for some reason it just did not sit with. He just didn't. He always had to throw his food away or some situation like that.
A sensitive stomach.
Yes.
Again, who is this weirdo?
So, anyways, he ends up going to Osaka University of Arts, and there he ended up actually getting expelled from school, both because or kicked out of school. I don't know if I would say expelled. I think he was having a problem getting funds together, but also he was working with a small crew of people on these intro animations for a big convention, and those would be the Daikon 3 and 4 opening animations. And again, you can look this up on YouTube. These were the first sort of animation projects that Anno got involved in with his crew that would go on later to form Gainax, and his crew was.
You should actually take the time to watch Daikon 4.
It's
Daikon
awesome.
IV, because it is a landmark achievement in anime, especially in terms of the confluence of influences and references. The thing is packed wall to wall from every single nerd thing possible at the time. And there's all these incredible singular animation shots, which at the time blew people's minds. Like, people did not associate these like tracking shots and parallax and like swooping kinetic visuals. And it literally like blew up as a cultural phenomenon, this 3-minute short set to ELO.
Set to ELO. Yeah.
I love ELO.
Yeah, me too. Oh, totally, dude. It's really cool.
Sorry, I had to do that.
And those fellow students were Hiroyuki Yamaga and Takami Akai, and they would go on to form Gainax, which would give us Neon Genesis Evangelion. And you just brought up the point, the fact that it was just a small group of kids in their like dorm room creating this thing really blew people's minds. These sort of level of artistry that went into these. I mean, it came off like a big budget anime production, and it was made in a tiny room by a group of a few people, and that really blew people away.
Absolutely. A weird piece of Hideaki Anno ephemera is one of his first pro gigs was working with Hayao Miyazaki.
Yes, I was just about to bring that up.
He answered an ad in the back of a fan magazine and was responsible for the goopy half-fetus god monster from Nausicaa Valley of the Wind.
Nausicaa Valley of the Wind was sort of struggling. It was a really crazy production process for them, and they were in desperate need of last-minute animators, so they put out an ad in the animation magazine Animage or Animage? Either way, right? Whatever, we'll go with the Animage because it's the Wizard and the Bruiser. Anno saw it, and he actually went to the film studio, and Miyazaki was so impressed with his work, he actually gave him some of the more bulky, kind of more high-end scenes of the film, and they formed a partnership, or a friendship, rather, that they still hold to this day.
It's weird that he got his start drawing an unsettling, gross, primordial monster. Who knew? Maybe that would come in handy later. We'll see.
And as I said, Gainax would end up being formed in December of 1984. Their first feature-length film was called, of course, Royal Space Force: The Wings of Hanayamase. The series that he worked on, Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water, which was, I know, right? Which was handed down to him, and he had very little creative control over the project. He fell into a deep depression.
I remember being a young VHS era anime kid, and seeing that series in in the Viz catalog, and just like everything from the title to it was just Snooze City. Yeah, I could not give. I was actually shocked in cursory research, being like, oh, he worked on that thing. It was just a weird
well,
piece.
At least it did spiral him into a horror. So
it makes sense. It makes sense that the thing that I just felt nothing for made him feel nothing.
So, according to Yasuhiro Takeda, Anno agreed to a collaboration between King Records and Gainax. While drinking with a King representative, the guy pretty much just said, make anything, just something, anything. And that's when he started developing the new series, Neon Genesis Evangelion. And really, it was just a lot of him writing down what he was going through. And it makes so much sense if you watch the show, which we're about to kind of get into the thick meat of what this show is all about. Juicy child meat, Jake. Honestly, adding a weird sexual overtone to the fact that there are children's in this is exactly what Neon Genesis is about.
there's all these themes in like the super robot genre, all these like children's anime tropes, like the plucky young pilot that's chosen to like help save the world, and like the cute girl, and like the otherworldly monsters, and like the friendly, technicians and like leaders that help them out back at the base. And there's all these like very almost burned into the psyches, like into the patchwork of anime that Evangelion just piece by piece tears apart. And we talk about the psychological depression. We talk about we're going to get into a lot of it, but it's really key. I honestly believe this. This is what I was thinking of on the way to the train, that the exact way that Evangelion captures just like the fucked upness of like emergent first world like teenageness. I don't know if there's like going to be a story like that ever again in our lifetime. I feel like because of Evangelion, we've like examined that, like, man, it sure sucks because you're supposed to be a grown up and have responsibilities, but you're just horny and confused and scared all the time. And Evangelion tapped into these like dark inner emotions that never really were addressed in anime before, in the guise of this totemic like baseline children's format.
And I definitely want to kind of describe a little bit more of the ins and outs of what the whole story was. We should probably do that. But before we get to that, you bring up such a good point, because at that time as well, anime was in a slump, and Japan was in a big financial slump. And really, like, all of the things you just described, these big mech animes and stuff, might not still exist if it weren't for the revitalization that they were given by Neon Genesis Evangelion, and the great works of art that came in within the anime genre after Neon Genesis Evangelion. It paved the way to allow people to make interesting choices, to be introspective, to explore religion and psychology within the guise of these plucky young kids and their big crazy robots.
People credit it with ushering in that golden age of 90s anime that like we talk about sometimes. Stuff like basically all the stuff you watched on Adult Swim, Cowboy Bebop, and the like. The up production budget, the more mature themes, they were all proven to be like marketable and memorable because of Evangelion's success.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about this story, just so that if people have never heard of this show before, or maybe have heard but haven't really, and only dabbled.
Shinji Ikari was just a normal boy growing up in
I must have run away. I must have run away.
Mommy. Normal boy growing up in post-apocalyptic Tokyo.
Tokyo 3. After the second impact happened, essentially
a meteor had struck the Earth and unleashed terrible monsters across the region.
And those monsters are called angels, and they come from our Lord God.
Yeah, that was like number oh, it's so many juicy, like, this is just raw, like, angry teen bait. Number one, instead of spooky aliens, they're literal angels that may or may not be the wrath of God trying to erase humanity for its own sins.
Yes.
And humanity, in response, just builds robots to try and fucking kill the angel. I feel like we should get, like, the base story and then break apart all the ways it like just ripped it apart.
So Shinji Ikari is called upon by his father, who runs NERV. Now NERV is sort of the Japanese military force.
Marcus, what does NERV stand for, by the way? Yeah, it's a military force.
Nerds eating raw vagina.
I mean,
is the opposite of what it stands for. Either way, until while Marcus looks for that, Gendo Ikari, Shinji's father, calls upon him because he needs to pilot these robots, because apparently only certain kids who have connectivity sort of to these giant biomech monster robots that need to protect Tokyo 3 from these angels that are coming down trying to destroy the planet. So he calls upon him, and there's also they're called Avas, by the way, these giant mech robots. And Rei Ayunami is another pilot of a different Ava, and she's real quiet and weird and sort of like apparently very attractive to a lot of men. She sells very well. They call her the premium girl because if she's put on the cover of anything, it sells very well.
NERV isn't an acronym, by the way. It stands for nothing.
Oh, there you go. And Asuka, who ends up coming in a little later, I'll kill you, I'll kill you, I'll kill you. And she...
I like that you give the dark whispers.
and
she's plucky.
She's plucky for a
firebrand.
For a little girl who discovered her mother's body shortly after her suicide and represses her emotions and vows never to cry. Shinji, of course, has an Oedipus complex. He witnessed his mother's death, and was abandoned by his father. And Rei has all sorts of crazy crap going on. But
through pluckiness and determination, they'll fight back against the monsters and save humanity.
Or go insane?
Maybe like the first couple of times they are working together and fighting monsters, then shit starts going wrong and they keep watching people die and they keep
like
failing.
blood. It tastes like blood. So essentially what Anno does is take these poor kids and puts them in these horrible mind breaking situations where they're facing God and all of existence and dealing with all their psychological bullshit.
Boy goes in a tube goes in a robot fights monster.
There you go. And I should also mention Misato Katsuragi, the caretaker commanding officer.
Misato. I remember that she has a pet penguin and drinks beer.
Pen.
Yeah. And definitely doesn't represent the allure of adult sexuality at a very sensitive time in a boy's life.
And she definitely doesn't have an Electra complex and is consumed with conflicting love and hate for her father, and that's why she tries to find her father in Kaji's embrace.
Oh, yeah. So one of the big things that this show did differently, right on the surface, not even within the subtext and the psychology and the religiosity, is just that the characters, the heroes, instead of gambate, do it, run, go, fight, they got PTSD.
Yeah,
they
completely
shut down inside.
Shinji's I can't do this. He's immediately put in a situation. I mean, from the moment the show started, I was really into it, just on the basis that this kid doesn't want to do this. He's fighting back for once. His dad's you have to pilot this Eva, and he's I don't want to, father. I can't do this. I'm just a little kid. And he's you fucking have to. And then they put him into the Eva instead of him becoming this badass hero. It's torture for him. It's a nightmare. He's ripping this other angel apart, and he's freaking out. And the Eva takes control over his controls so that because he can't do it the first time. He's not even able to go through with it, and so he's just sitting there watching this monster murder this other monster while inside of it, which people also say that him crawling into the Eva is essentially our attempt to return to the womb, and his attempt to break out of the Eva is
it's literally not figurative. They later reveal that the Ava 01 is his mother's genetic code.
Yes, absolutely.
He's physically inside his mother.
Yeah, it's all about that stuff. And we haven't even gotten into the religious overtones going on here. We've only been talking about the sexuality stuff. So, I'm
sensing a lot of recurring themes here because we have big robots, and we're going to get into the Kabbalah. Thanks, Alan Moore.
The triad, right, is human psychology, mech animes, giant robots, otaku stuff, mixed with these just intense religious symbolism and concepts all thrown together. This is just, and Anno always said, he even is self-admittedly semi-autistic, if not 100% autistic.
He's got a little sprinkle of the Aspie.
He has a really hard time communicating, and he said expression is basically the process of creating something that's missing, attempting to get an idea across to someone else, trying to make yourself whole at the same time for those who have a hard time relating to the people around them. This is his way of just trying to communicate all of the things inside of him across to someone else, and he can only do it in this format. There's no other way to do that. So that's why you get this tangle of intense. Okay, so you've got the Tree of Life, you've got the Kabbalah,
Freud.
You've got Freud. I'm mainly just dealing with the religious stuff right now. You've got mainly
the angelic orders, seraphim, all these things.
You've got the Shinto, Japanese religion. You've got mainly dealing the texts of Kojiki and Nihon Shoki, which are the oldest Japanese sort of texts that both were historical texts, but also gave the Japanese creation myth. And there was the whole concept of there's sort of what they kind of get into, especially at the end of the whole series,
It's
and end of
very
Evangelion,
big in the end.
the primordial goop and all that kind of
Transcendence,
stuff.
kind of Buddhist, non-being and unity within, breaking free of a cycle of life and death. Is a huge part of it. And Marcus, actually, you'll appreciate this. Early script revisions were desperately needed because Anno was making the series, and at the time, the Om Shinrikyo attacks happened. Ooh. And he was actually kind of upset that there were so many overlaps with like existentialism, mysticism, and otaku bullshit that was Om Shinrikyo's kind of trade and cap.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Like actually, the people who made the people who were a part of the Om Shinrikyo cult, they specifically recruited anime nerds and manga nerds. Like that was the people. Like they used. I can't remember. I think it was the Foundation. Asimov's The Foundation was pretty much the I guess underlying basis of Om Shinrikyo. Like they specifically went for anime people. Yeah, Neon Genesis. You can see
It
a lot of
actually
that shit now.
infuriated Anno, and he made specific alterations to the original series, specifically to kind of like divorce the idea that like, yeah, you can acknowledge the darkness and otaku shit, but like, don't fucking kill people, you maniacs.
Right, right. They also had Judeo-Christian themes. Adam, Lilith, the Lilim.
Oh, yeah.
Eve, the Lance of Longinus. Of course, we all remember the Lance of Longinus. Big part of the show.
Pierce that side.
Yeah, there you go. Dead Sea Scrolls. Also, the Kabbalistic concept of Adam Kadmon, which was a really interesting thing to look up today. It was essentially the idea of like there was a plot of light where all creation comes from, a sort of like a weird sort of like a goop of its own where sort of all things came from. And as I said, the Tree of Life. And I remember I played a game with my friends when we first watched it that every time you saw a cross on screen, you yelled cross. So we would all, that's a fun game for people to play at home if they want to. You just scream cross and probably take a drink too if you're a drinker, or a shot of heroin if you're if you're an addict.
I think it would be worthwhile to talk about some of the stuff that the show did absolutely correct, because there's a lot of like, heady anime and heady TV shows out there that don't get as popular, because I feel like Evangelion managed to balance the action and like the drama and the tension in a lot of like I'm flooded with like really memorable episodes. The Magma Diver episode where they had to constantly monitor the temperature of the Eva as they tried to recover an Angel's S drive that was like buried under lava. And, that kind of harkened back to a lot of like submarine Das Boot claustrophobic series. There was that episode with the rogue American robot with a nuclear drive that they had to shut down because it was like going to nuke a city. The dynamic between how all the Evas were powered by an umbilical cable.
Yeah.
And after the cable is disconnected, which it always would, they had a 5-minute battery backup timer that made it like so they always had to defeat the monster within a specific time limit. The idea that they would have the guns and the guns wouldn't work, so then they'd have to bust out the sonic knife, the vibration
that
knife.
Giant,
It was a box cutter.
The AT field is their soul.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
So even though it was like a big like pow pow explosion anime, it felt a lot like kind of I remember like Star Trek ship to ship combat, where it's a lot of like people at consoles being like shields at 15%. Like it was very high tension, very dramatic. Every episode would keep you on the edge of your seat. They were impeccable action storytellers.
And the thing was, it was 26 episodes, right?
Oh shit! I forgot to make a joke.
It was 26 episodes, but there's a bit of a change that happens about halfway through the series, and I think that is also attributed to a lot of what made the show so special for a lot of people. Because I remember I was kind of handed this thing by a friend of mine. I'll credit him. Tim Dean turned me on to this. He said to me, he said, it starts off like silly, not silly, but it starts off like very regular. Yeah, pin, animes, mech, kind of.
Panty flash, tee
right.
Whoopsie,
Baka.
We'll be back with more fan service in the next episode.
Right? Very, very right down the line. But around episode 16, things begin to change. And one account says that the change coincided with Anno's development of an interest in psychology after a friend lent him a book on mental illness. stillness. And that's when really we just kind of fly completely off the handle of sort of that run-of-the-mill and where that whole deconstruction of the standard mech anime genre and all these kinds of things start to happen. He decides to just kind of completely go off the script and really just start to break these people down on a personal level, which was this very exciting and terrifying and just kind of gut punch of a thing to happen in a show that you're watching, where it kind of seduces you with the big fun robot fights, and then all of a sudden I'm like dealing with my bullshit with my like mom, and on like a scary level, and it really was special to me for that reason. I was really sucked into the show. I found the first half to be incredibly entertaining, and then all of a sudden it was like this special, amazing thing that was happening, like at me and to me, that I had such a personal connection with when I first saw it in college. And we, of course, have to talk about the final 2 episodes.
So this show was building ahead of steam. It was affecting people on a deep level. They were making people consider things they never considered before.
Oh, also, it was running on a child's time slot, and they deemed it too violent. But Otto said, I can't find it off the top, but he says in the thing, he's like, children should be exposed to this at an early age. People should be...
It's just a little bit true.
I'm sorry.
But it was gaining popularity. The character of Rei Ayanami was so fucking popular, and literally it was just a approachable 14-year-old girl that was just mysterious. Like,
right.
It was very,
and curvy.
What? I guess so. Yeah. Shit. Yeah.
Yeah. They were wearing skin-tight suits.
Oh, yeah. So, like...
I didn't look at Ray cosplay today. So don't look at me, Marcus.
Oh, yeah, they were wearing those plug suits.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're called plug suits.
Mamma mia. And I think this happens a lot of times, stuff like Lost and Battlestar Galactica. Anytime a piece of pop culture actually touches upon these larger subjects like identity and religion and development and depression and mental illness and all these things, when it builds to a finale, people don't want just a resolution of the plot. They want a resolution of those issues.
Yes.
And it's such a monumentally gigantic task. It's kind of why we were praising Alan Moore in our previous episodes, because he could stick the landings because he had the individual focus to do it. Also, he was working with a much smaller budget.
Yes. And that I have scoured the internet over the past few days in preparation for this, and I get a lot of different accounts. Some people definitely say it was because they ran out of money, right? I mean, and that seems like the obvious thing by the way, the last 2 episodes, very little animation, very internal, very weird sort of character deconstructions. It completely goes, I mean, we should just explain what happens. It completely just goes off the map harder than anything else in the show.
It feels like a collage or a wishboard. Like there are these little motifs and segments, and nothing's quite connected to one another. And the characters are addressing each other in ways that they never did in the show. And it's very jarring. It is it's
abstract. It's sort of weird kind of close-ups of still images and things like that, and just a lot of weird character testimonials and sort of it's very, very, very bizarre and
avant-garde.
Yes, very avant-garde. And other people though say that that's what he did intend, that he was the kind of guy who sort of left things up to the last minute, and when they got to that part of the show, that's the choice he wanted. That's what he wanted to do. But it caused a bit of a backlash. He did receive death threats and things of that nature. And other people loved it. And even today, I have some friends who swear by those final 2 episodes as the end of the whole thing, and other people who swear by what he would eventually come to make, which was End of Evangelion, a film where he essentially was like, psych, stop sending me death threats. Here's the real
Here's
ending.
a real cool fight scene.
Yeah, exactly. Here's a real cool fight scene for half the movie, and then also, by the way, I'm going to mind fuck you again with the final half of the movie, and it's going to be yet another just bonkers ass fucking primordial soup of a ending that is so good.
Yeah, End of Evangelion
I love
is
it.
way more satisfying.
Yes.
I remember being in college watching this, and they have just that slow pan of an actual live action audience watching a movie, and they just start talking about like, and who the fuck are you sitting there? Like, it's like, it's that kind of shit when you're
so
especially
good.
young, where you're just like, oh fuck yeah.
It's so good.
And they gave Asuka a cool eye patch.
Yeah, they totally do. I should mention too that there is also Evangelion Death and Rebirth, just to clarify in case you were interested in going through the series. The first half of that film is a recap of the series, and the second half is actually the first third of End of Evangelion, so you don't need to watch Death and Rebirth. Just watch the series and then go straight to End of Evangelion after that. I don't know. It's this really intense and special thing for me, and it's something that I'll continue to watch through my life.
We have to hang out and watch all the new movies.
So yeah, he's still making Evangelion. I think that's a really awesome thing. It's called Rebuild of Evangelion. Essentially, what happened was he decided that now he could truly tell the story he always wanted to tell without issues with budget situations. Now that it's as popular as it is, he could go back and make the thing he always wanted to make. I've seen the first. You've seen the first all 3?
No, I actually have got. I'm so behind.
So there's Evangelion.
Teach me, Sensei.
There's Evangelion 1.0. You are in parentheses not in parentheses alone. That came out in 2009. Then there's Evangelion 2.0. You can in parentheses not close parentheses advance. And then Evangelion 3.0, you can not redo. And we're going to get Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0, which will be the conclusion. So that's 4 movies. I've seen the first 2. They introduce new characters, new scenes, beautiful animation. It looks absolutely gorgeous. It's really, really incredible. And I haven't seen the third one. It is out, so I didn't realize that it came out earlier this year. And
you're a busy man with a girlfriend who's
I
got
know.
shit to do. You're in a band. You tour the country. You have a job. You're not in college anymore, old man. You don't have as much anime time.
If only.
I have plenty of anime time, but I just use it to watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
So he actually is now working on the final installment of the remake of Evangelion. He had to take some time off because he just made the new Godzilla movie,
Shin Gojira.
which is pretty badass.
Cool thing about Shin Gojira, Marcus, if you're questioning maybe should I see this or not, they redesigned Godzilla so that he has an unhinged double jaw, and the tip of his tail now has a gross skull face.
I'm in. Now, a few more things about Evangelion. One is that I actually had somebody on Facebook kind of like Debbie down on Evangelion like a while back. I think in our group, and I think he kind of was saying like, oh, they just threw all these things together, and he even had later admitted that he, didn't he didn't really like think things through, and he just kind of threw all this stuff together because it would look interesting, and kind of poo-pooed the whole thing. First of all, I would say no matter what, there's still something to get out of that. Second of all, he sort of he contradicts himself a lot in quotes. A big testament to, I don't know, the fact that he's already freely admitted that he's really bad at communicating with people. He's also said, as the symbols are mixed together for the first time, something like an interrelationship or a meaning emerges. And I do think that he did put a lot more thought than that person or his quotes, some of them, gives credit for.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, there's something to be said that if you think Evangelion is the be-all, end-all of psychologically deep narratives,
Right.
Obviously not. But the way
course.
that he used what I keep stressing was a very shallow art form and structure to tell this incredibly deep story was revolutionary. And always we're going to give credit for people that broke the mold. I mean, God, like your dad was evil. Now, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
The girl you had a crush on was a gross fuck clone. God wants you to die and you don't want to let him. Your new best friend that's kind of giving you a gay panic might be also God trying to kill you. You have to actively decide whether humanity should transcend its identity as individual beings.
And
there's a giant naked girl in the sky.
And it was an incredibly personal work for Anno. He's described Rei as a schizophrenic that represents Shinji's unconscious. He describes Shinji as a reflection of Anno as a person, both conscious and unconscious. Kaworu, who ends up being the fifth child and some other things, he says is his Jungian shadow, which is the unconscious aspect of a person's personality. And I think there's a really cool thing to check out on YouTube. It's called Extracurricular Lesson with Hideaki Anno, and it's him teaching a class of children about animation. And they do this really cool exercise where they all need to create a short animation with a circle. So they each draw, like, very just on a few pages, they take a circle and they develop their own sort of animation with it. And they're all stumped at first because he doesn't tell them what to do, you know, and he sort of supports all the work that they do. And then he puts it together and like films the sheets and then puts the whole thing together, and you watch as this circle goes through this journey that was made by these little kids' hands. And it's like this amazing thing. He also gets interviewed by them. And it's a really cool moment. It's a very sad moment. This little girl says, do you like the anime you make? And Anno responds, well, I like some, but hate others. Little girl, what parts don't you like? Anno, the parts where I see myself.
Aww.
He hates himself. He's a very deeply troubled person, and the only way he can communicate is through these sort of works. And he's also made some films, some really interesting stuff. There's a lot of other cool things to check out in the Gygax.
Gynax.
My
We did
bad.
Gygax on the Dungeons and Dragons episode.
Gotcha, that's what it is. That's why I keep saying Gygax. So yeah, I don't know. He's a fascinating guy. He also there was this one great quote. Maybe I'm not gonna be able to find it this quickly, but he speaks about Evangelion as a piece of his soul, and every time he works on it, little chunks of him kind of like of his soul sort of pop off onto the work.
Neato.
Yeah, he's a deep, interesting, fucked dude, and he's still making work, and that's a beautiful, wonderful thing.
And all of us are interesting and fucked.
Yeah,
and I feel like when you watch Evangelion, even to this day, you see these characters that are suffering and like trying to work through an impossible situation, and you can't help but like see a little bit of yourself and see a part of like the old you when you see these characters kind of come to terms with the things they need to come to terms with.
And I also want to say, like, I haven't dealt with like clinical depression, but I get sad, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But like, think about that. Like, he made this with that, and maybe you can do that if you deal with clinical depression. And I would consider maybe trying to find a way to like make work out of that.
No, it was one of the first big pop culture explosions that acknowledged a reality that many people live with. I remember when I watched an end of Evangelion when Shinji jerked off over his unconscious friend's body because he accidentally saw her boobs. I was like, oh man, I've been there, buddy. Hashtag it gets better.
So if you want to learn more, I would highly suggest checking out those videos on YouTube, but also there's a manga out by Katsuhiko, I suck at saying Japanese people's names. Shimamoto, it's a weird nickname they gave that guy. The name of the manga is I'm just gonna spell it Aoi space Hono Aoi Hono, and it's a coming-of-age manga that's actually about his time at Osaka University of the Arts with Anno and the others that formed Gainax. So that'll actually give you a history of the beginnings of that company. Also, Insufficient Direction is a manga by Anno's wife, Moyoko Anno, who is a manga artist herself, and it's about their marriage. And so you can learn a lot about, and it's very much about Anno and his obsession with, all the sort of all anime and all that kind of stuff.
And I know what you're thinking. Holden, Jake, Marcus, what about that weird-ass side anime about all the Evangelion characters if they're in like a funny high school comedy? And to that I answer, nobody watched that, you nerd. Hey, it'd be great if Evangelion lacked all the cool shit that made it Evangelion.
Yeah, so I think that's it. I mean, I'm tapped. What about you, Jake?
I think this was I think we did some justice, and it's definitely a series worth revisiting.
Absolutely. I know I'm gonna actually go force my girlfriend to watch it, probably in the next week or so. I'm sorry, Lexi.
Oh, let me know when you get to the third movie. We can do a slam jam.
Yeah, awesome. Wait, what's the definition of a slam jam?
You all get... Yeah, old orgy Jake, back at it again. You got me.
I thought it would be more like jam, like there was some jelly involved.
I mean, there will be marmalade. I threaten you that. Follow me on Twitter at BestJakeYoung. Go to dorkly.com, see the stuff I write, and go on the Drawfee channel where I regularly sass people who are trying to make art.
Holdenators Ho on Twitch, at Holdenators on Twitter, and I don't know. Go to the Facebook page, Wizard and the Bruiser. A lot of great discussions going on there, and please rate and review. Even if you say that we stink and our words are bad boy words, just give us 5 stars. Thank you very much, everybody.
For more shows like the one you just listened to, go to cavecomedyradio.com.